Hey Hodies, welcome to my channel. My name is hautemesstom and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today we are going to be doing an eye for an eye with the Isamaya Industrial Colors eyeshadow palette. If you are new to the concept of an eye for an eye, what I like to do when I buy a new eyeshadow palette, because I have a lot of eyeshadows, what I like to try to do is dupe out the palette as best I can with my collection, because I have three ethos that I kind of try to stick to when I'm talking about makeup on my channel, and one of them is to love my makeup collection as it is, and then another one of them is to make sure that I'm bringing things into my collection that are adding value. And this is a video that takes two of those, those two ethos, and smashes them together. So if you are into loving your makeup collection as it is, not always buying the new releases, and whenever you are buying a new release, that you are trying your best to make the best decision that you can, I would love to have you subscribe. That's a lot of what we do here on the channel. We do a little bit of conscious consumerism, as conscious as you can be in this economy. Make sure you like this video because that really does help me. It gets me into the eyes of many other people. And if you would like to support me even further, I am also on Patreon, and that is linked in my description box below and should be going across the screen here. So if you are new here, I bought the Isamaya palette and I did a first impressions on it. And if you missed that video, I will link it in the cards and in the description box below for you as well. And I played with it, had a lot of fun with it, and I've been exploring the palette even more so since that video. Something I like to make sure that I do on my channel is that you never see something just one time. And I don't think that happens with a lot of smaller creators, like people who are on my level, or in the 50,000 to 100,000 of my channel when I'm reviewing something, because I consider that first impressions to be a first impressions, and then there's gonna be a follow-up video once I have my final thoughts on the eyeshadow palette. And you get to see me develop those thoughts, so that's really important to me. So what I've done today, there will be chapters along the timeline, so if you want to click around, if you're interested in a specific thing that I'm about to tell you what we're breaking it down into, go ahead and click to there. So on camera, I will be showing you me trying to dupe out the eyeshadows overhead, all of my shadows that I can either remove from pans or that are just single shadows, and just it's madness. It's really madness. It's chaotic. It's chaotic. It really is. It's actually one of my least favorite things to film is the overhead. I get really nervous. I get really nervous about it. I don't feel comfortable doing it. I don't know why I feel so conscious about it, but I really do. So that's me picking out the eyeshadows. And so at that point, hopefully what that inspires you to do, if you were inspired by the Isamaya palette and you haven't already purchased it, or even if you have already purchased it, I think this is a worthwhile activity to do. Luckily for well, presumably for you, you're not doing it on camera, because I think it's more nervous making whenever you are doing it on camera. So that's what I do first. That's the first part that happens. And then the second part is, on each one of my eyes, this has already happened. I've already recorded this part for you, but on my eyes right now, one of my eyes is the Isamaya palette. One of my eyes is the self-made palette. So the one that I was duping it out with. I don't know if you can tell which eye is which, but there is always a final thought, and that's also going to be included there too. So you're picking out the shadows, the application of both eyes, and then some final thoughts, and that's the whole video. That's the whole video. So I'll transition you right into that overhead footage and enjoy the ride. All right, here is the Isamaya palette in all its glory. Here we go. Hello to my face. Oh God. I mean, actually that angle's not that bad. You'd think it'd be worse. So unlike in my previous Eye for an Eyes, where I kind of go shadow by shadow and look through my collection, what I'm going to do is kind of speed through that while playing some music for you, and then I will make my final decisions with you. So I'll pull a few things for each shade, and then I will come back and we will make final decisions together.
All I want
here's what I've kind of run into. I don't think I'm gonna have like shade for a shade, but I think that's okay. The most wonderful, I've only had this 2 weeks, but as I've been playing with it, one of my favorite parts about it is the interesting textures and the opacity of the shades and like how you're really inspired to layer them. And I think that's what we're gonna have to go with here. There are a few shades where I feel like I found something close and I would like to go through them. So I obviously have a handful of blacks. This is the only matte black. So whenever I look at this, this is from the Antiquities palette, and then this is from the Isamaya palette. They're different. They're very different. Like this is more buildable. This one is like feels greasy, whereas this is like a matte. However, this is from Pat McGrath. Still a little darker, but like has the feel of it. This is from Kevin Aquan. Way more pigmented as well. And then I have this one from Viseart, which I think, minus the glitter in it, which I think kind of gives the best vibe. So I am gonna take the Viseart black. Sorry for the disarray, but that's the nature of building a palette. Building your own palette. I need my cellar water. So then there's this blue shifty shade. I have this. This is an Astral Pigment from Pat McGrath. They have similar vibes. However, the Pat McGrath one, whenever it's like applied, has more shimmer to it. And then this is not as sparkly, as you can see, but they both have that shift where it's like only visible sometimes. So I thought that's why they would be good for duping each other out. Then I have this is the shade Glow from Cleona. It is also more blue. It also has some more texture. But now that I'm seeing the Isamaya one swatched out, I didn't realize it was as purple as it was. Okay, this is the shade Glisten. Okay, I think perhaps Glisten is the closest. I didn't realize how purple leaning that shade was until swatching it just now. Actually, I liked the other option better. Yeah, I like Glimmer better, so I'm gonna take Glimmer. And then I'm gonna take this. This is the more blue one called Glow. I don't have anything that's gonna be like this shade from the Isamaya palette, and hopefully, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but this is like a black that has, well, it's a black that has like a navy sparkle in it. And it's more of like, it lays more of like a satin. It kind of makes it look like a satin black. So what I figure I could do with the palette that I'm making is that if I wanted to do something similar, I could layer the black and this blue and hopefully get something. It won't be this subtle, but I think if I work it out and blend it quite well, I might be able to get like a similar effect should I want to. And kind of moving on, we have this rusty shade from the Isamaya palette. So I pulled Sandblast from Cleona. It has a little more oomph, and it is a multi-chrome that shifts a green, which I think would be appropriate for this palette considering how green heavy it actually is in real life. But I also grabbed a couple other options. This is from a Natasha Denona palette. I believe it's from the Coral palette. So it's a little more, I mean, coral. It has a little more of a red in it than the other two do. And then also from Natasha Denona is this guy. And this is from the Love palette, I believe. Maybe? No, that can't be right. Metropolis. This is from Metropolis. It's more turning into like a duping of a vibes at this point. Like I'm not gonna have a perfect thing. So I think I'll go with Sandblast from Clionadh. So next up we have like this green. And I have this shade from the Gold palette, which is more like a topper and doesn't have that deepened base. But I don't have anything that is going to like feel just like that. It's like nothing else I have really gives that kind of thing. So what I'm doing is I'm actually going to put that in there, and I'm going to have to like mix around, and like, of course it's not going to look the same as that, but I just don't have that. Like, that's just not a thing I have in my collection. So I have the silver. I just skipped a shade. I know I did, but I do have silvers. So that was why I was like, let me just skip to this real quick. So I have two different silvers from Natasha Denona, and these are both from the 28 pan palettes. We have three very different silvers here. We have like this, which is like almost purpley in camera. I think you can see that. And there's like a really flaky texture to this. This Natasha Denona one also has some beautiful texture to it, but it's a different silver. It's a different silver. And then this silver is more like a mixed metallic. I see some gold in it. So I think these two would be like closer, and like also you're getting some of that texture. Now I just need to make sure that I know which one it is. The silver is settled. Now I have this like really deep, beautiful bronze, but it has this green shift to it. It's like you look at this palette and you think it's one thing, and then it like fully gives you a completely different experience. Like perhaps it's kind of close. Like I just. So I actually think that this arsenic shade would probably be the best, but it's like certainly not perfect. Next up from Isamaya, we have this like, this deep rust. So I already pulled some shades like that, but let me check again. I gotta find something that gives off this effect. The problem is that we're like kind of running into is that the Clionadh palette, like my Clionadh shades, because of all of the dimension in them, it's like they're just like not a good fit for this type of thing, because we can't have all of the shifts. I like to add the shifts every now and then to like give a little something. It's definitely like purple leaning, and if anything, for the most part, the Isamaya palette gives me like more warm vibes. But I don't hate this purpley bronze as an alternative. That feels a lot more in the spirit. So this is from the 28 pan green. I think my Natasha Denona palettes are a little just kind of askew, and I'm okay with that. As long I have them all, and that is what is more important to me. We're on the second row, and so this is like a nice, beautiful gold. Oh, that's like a green leaning gold. Perhaps I want to do something a little more pigmented. I grabbed all these gold greens because like that is often what we're finding. So I think I can So I'm gonna go with these two. Well, the one on this finger, that is the Isamaya one. Nope. Yes. And then this one is from Pat McGrath's first mega ship. So here's another really funky shade. It looks more gold. It's like this just really grungy, gorgeous. It's like almost the shade I just put in. No, it's not. It's not at all like that. Of course it isn't. Because why would it be? So this is a shade from Kevin Aquan on my middle finger, and then the Isamaya shade is on that, so I think that's like the best we're going to get when it comes to that. And then let me talk you through this. So Isamaya's palette has this like incredibly sparkly, almost like pressed glitter situation that's almost black. And the only thing that I have that deep that has that texture is this purple shade from Pat McGrath. So like that was my default for that because I just like don't have anything in my collection like that sparkly black shade. However, this reminds me a lot of Sparks from the gold palette from Natasha Denona. This one has a little more gold leaning to it, but it is like the same idea as a topper. And so I think that that's going to be fine. And so there is this other topper shade that has a green shift to it. And this is also from the gold palette and serves a similar purpose. I also brought out Kava. The green from the Isamaya that has like this topper shade quality, like this one right here, is just like, it's a much more subtle wet shine than the ones from the gold palette. So I'm gonna go with this green leaning one for this shade. And then we have the last shade, which is like this beautiful, vibrant green. And I actually think we can go into a Cleona for that. So this is the shade Courtyard, and I believe that this is one of their vibrant multi-chromes, and it doesn't have too much of a shift, and I think that will be helpful when constructing an imitation look as best I can. I mean, who knows what my eyes are even gonna look like at the end of this. So you can see a slight shift to like pink, which this Isamaya shade doesn't do. Let me put all of this away, and then we will come back and we will do some swatching for comparison's sake. It'll be a laugh and a half, I'm sure. I think I pulled the most from the gold palette as far as like Natasha Denona shades. So interesting just to note. So here we are. Here's my interpretation in this yellow palette, obviously, and then here is the real palette. I am going to swatch this one on my left arm, and I will swatch mine on my right arm. It will go however it goes. I'm not, I don't claim to be, and I am certainly not the best swatcher. I'm gonna zoom you out just a little bit so we can get started. Again, here's what we're working with. And here's a close-up of the palette that I made. Here we are, here they are, swatched next to each other. I mean, the biggest difference is the third one from the bottom, and perhaps just like the bottom most part of the arms. The top parts are like not bad, but like the bottom parts, you know, perhaps not the best. But we are trucking along. I will see you at my vanity. All right, it's time to apply this to the eyes. First and foremost, my skin, it's normally pretty good, but I think we're in a rhythm. I think we've gotten, like, my skin looks fresh. My skin looks clean. I'm just saying. It looks really good right now. Anywho, besides my skin looking really good, I feel like the last couple times I did an eye for an eye, when I've done this, I was really trying hard to like match as best I could. But I think what would happen if I did that with the two palettes I have, because I was like pretty unsuccessful. I'm not like beating myself up over it. However, it just like my collection didn't afford myself to be able to like perfectly dupe this. So I think what would happen if I would get a very boring eye if I like only really use the shades that I feel like I did a successful job in. And I think the most beautiful part about, I mean, this could be argued for any eyeshadow palette, but specifically the Isamaya palette, there's something about it that just sparks like different eye construction for me. So I'm gonna use the shades that I'm gonna match the eyes the best I can, but I just think that this time it's like really not gonna be as close as it has been the other couple times that I have done this particular activity. So I think I'm trying to forgive myself for that now before I get into it. But I did prime my eyes with the Atelier eye primer, and I set that with the Pat McGrath setting powder. I probably should have just set the rest of my face. I'm like shiny. I think what I'm gonna start is with the black. So I have a color switch here. I will do one eye and then I will do the other eye, hence the name, an eye for an eye. And I think I need a different compact for this. This eye is going to be the Isamaya palette, and then this eye will be my self-constructed palette. So I will be using the same palette, like the same brush on both eyes, but I will be using the color switch in between. So I'm going to start with the matte black, the only matte shade in the palette from Isamaya. And I'm taking some guidance from HLP here. And just like what HLP does is really like kind of constructs like the darkest part on the outside first. And I'm going to go a little bit bigger with my eye shape than I even usually do. Or I guess as I have been, like bigger than I have been doing. I'm sweating. I'm turning on a fan. Sorry about the whirring of the fan, but I just don't want to be super sweaty. So there is some sparkle happening in here, but it's just like remnant sparkle from the brush, and it is what it is. My brushes are dirty right now. They need to be cleaned. However, as I have been able to identify with this palette, surely it doesn't matter. You're gonna get sparkles everywhere. And that might be a deterrent for some, but for me, it's like really a non-issue. Okay. I'm happy with that. I'm going to do the color switch and then I'm going to do it on the other eye. And this is a Viseart matte. And I think what we're going to notice right away is that this is going to be much more pigmented than the Isamaya. I made this eye shape a little bit different, so I need to go back in, and I was right. This Viseart black is more pigmented. And here's what I'm going to say to you in all honesty. To me, not super important. I think with the texture, because this matte shade from the Isamaya palette, I wouldn't say it's like powder, the way it feels like when you actually touch it with your fingers. I think if you recall, like, she was inspired by like inky shades. It was like something that was like a word that was tossed around whenever describing inspiration. And so what we have going on here is just like, this also has a little, I would say it's mostly matte, but I guess it has a little bit of, I'm gonna call it dewy or like shiny, or just like, it just has like a sheen, like a little bit of a sheen, but not like a satin. I'm gonna take a clean brush and just do some blending on the outskirts of both of these. I'm pleased with both of these shadows. I like the way both of them perform. And so I just think that there is like a little bit of a tone difference. Like this is a much deeper black than this. And again, that's to me not, I don't always think that pigmented is better. I think that something like the Isamaya one's going to be easier to work with. Not that the Viseart one is hard to work with. It blends out really nicely as well. I think Viseart are some of the easiest mattes to work with in my opinion, because they're more buildable than they are like instantly pigmented. And I really like pigmentation when I want it, but almost never with my mattes, because I do a lot of constructing with my mattes and I really like them to blend out and like really be blended out. But like if I am looking for something to be the star of the show, then of course I want it to be really super pigmented. But that's mostly when I'm like talking about multi-chromes or talking about like intense metallics. And that's just not what we have going on here. Okay, I think the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this shade from the Isamaya palette. And what I'm gonna do is take it like from my nose and blend it into this like this wing. And what's really interesting about this shade is that it doesn't really have a lot going on in as far as base goes, but it's there is a base. And so as you build it up, you start getting that, but it's mostly about this like gold green sparkle that really is like the star of the shade. So now I'm gonna do that with the equivalent of what I have over here. This shade is a shade from a Kevyn Aucoin palette that I depotted. And it's like this, I think it's gonna be a more intense brown. And we're not gonna have the sparkle, but I think I have a solution for that. And so I'm gonna have to play with my technique more on this side than I do on this side, because like this is what it is. And then this is us trying to match it with my collection. And I think maybe hopefully if I said this correctly when I was building the palette, my goal with some of the shades that I like really went off the walls with is to use those to build with, like really build. So I think this base is kind of the same. We just need the gold sparkles on top. And I put sparks in here, and I think sparks will give us that glimmer on top without adding like a base, which we already have down with the Kevyn Aucoin shade. So I am pulling out a different brush, and I'm just going to swipe sparks. And sparks is from the Natasha Denona Gold palette. I think I've watched so much HLP, and a lot of my audience has watched so much HLP. So we're losing a little bit of the gold. So I have a green gold in here that I also put in this palette that I made myself. I'm going to also sprinkle that on top. So I think we like have a very similar vibe here, but this is definitely more obviously it's more straightforward. This is like the shade. And then what we've done over here is like we've had to like conform it. And I also feel like the base is more bronzy on this shade than what I have going on over here. So not perfect, but I think we have something very similar going on. Next, I will be using my fingers. So I'm going to use my fingers to apply the silver, and I'm going to do that like just on the center of the lid. Something I've been really enjoying about the Isamaya palette, and while you can play with eyeshadows with your fingers if you want to anytime, but I think that Isamaya really kind of formulated these to not only be played with the fingers, but there was thought put into being like, these are going to be very finger friendly. And so like sometimes I find whenever I'm blending shimmers with my finger that like the blend into like the darker shade is like never really that good. But I find that it's really easy if I like take a clean finger and I like blend that into another shade. It works like a charm. Like it blends it just as well as I think it would be if I like used one of my fancier tools. Okay, now I'm gonna do the same thing with my Natasha Denona silver on this eye. I would say this is as of right now. I still am like, working on final thoughts for my Isamaya palette. But I would say right now that the silver shade is the one that I'm always like the most excited to stick any tool in, my fingers, whatever. There's just something really wonderful about like the texture, very satisfying about it. It's so flaky. But the silvers aren't quite dead on silvers. Like they're like this one's icier than this one. So there you go. I think that's what I really can point out. So now we have that, and on the inner corner, I think I'm going to use my like rusty shades. The rusty shade from the Isamaya palette with my rusty multi-chrome. So we're definitely going to see a difference here. I'm going to be using this brush to do that. It's not really important, but I am going to be using a brush. So I'm going to sweep that on. I'm going to do the same with the other side. The multi-chrome, I'm going to like flick off a little bit more than I did with the Isamaya one. Okay, so this definitely has a much more blackened base than this one, but kind of effectively they look very similar. Like if I had put a black down underneath that, I think that they would read very similarly. Next I'm going to do is I'm going to use this blue shade, and I'm going to like carefully place this on the transition between the silver and that copper shade to kind of improve the blend, but also give a little bit of mystique. I will say that this shifty shade is, while not super unique in formula, we've definitely seen like shifty shades like this before, is ultimately just like very satisfying to use every time I've used it. I don't know if this will like read on camera, but there is a little bit of a shift happening here. I think what's going to happen is that when I put the one on the other side, it's going to be much more noticeable just because of the nature of like the Cliona glimmers. Oh, maybe not so much. Okay. That's great. I mean, it's great in today's needs. I'm not sure that any of that was picking up on camera. So here you can see it. And the Isamaya one is not as pigmented, but I kind of called that. I'm just putting a little bit more on to see if we can get it really going. It's really a beautiful effect on both. It's just like this weird, interesting, like, what's going on there? Next, I don't think I'm done playing. I don't think I am. What I want to do now, maybe, I'm thinking. Okay, what I'm gonna do next. Ew. Today's been a weird day. I'm not really gonna go into why it's been a weird day. It's not been a bad day. It's just been like incredibly strange. I'm gonna take this, like this is like one of those sheer shades. I'm gonna take it and I'm going to apply that to the black out here where it can be seen and appreciated. Because something up there are these like beautiful topper shades in here, like effectively just like really just topper shades. But what I've noticed is that with all the other shimmery shades in here, they'll get lost in the sauce sometimes. That's how I feel about them. And then I'm going to use my personal equivalent on the other side, but mine is definitely more goldy. But I like that. Like I like that we're almost completely shimmery. I think what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna do the rest of my face and I'm gonna do a little bit something underneath so we can play with a little bit more. But I'm gonna do that off camera, and then when I'm back, we'll take a look. So I've done the rest of my face, which we'll zoom. You've already seen it, so no worries there. What I want to do is I actually want to take some of the black underneath each eye. I'm going to take a smaller brush and try to get it closer to my lash line a little bit deeper. I'll do the same thing with the other eye. And now what I want to do, the real star of the show is I want to take the greens. I want to take the greens and put them on the inner portion. Then my green from my palette. Very different. This one is pulling the shift more like pulling the shift pink. in where it's placed and where the light is hitting me right now, where this is like obviously holding true to green. But I mean, in person, whenever like the light hits it at the angles in which you can see the green, not very different. Okay, that's that. And then I'm gonna finish my face and my final thoughts, and I will report back to you with how I felt like this went. It's time for my final thoughts on this. So first and foremost, I would like to say that my dupe eye actually turned out a lot more similar than I was expecting it to. I thought I was gonna have a lot more issues when I was constructing the look, that it was gonna feel very, very different, but the vibe is the same. Well, things aren't exact, and like I think you would have to really pay a lot of attention to it to really clock the differences in it. Here's what I'm going to say. If you have a pretty robust singles collection, or you have a pretty robust amount of options of eyeshadows for you, I don't know that the Isamaya in color is going to provide you something that you can't achieve. Unlike other palettes I've done in an Eye4AnEye, and this could just be a me thing, so I'm gonna state that before I go into what I'm about to say. This color story with these textures all together sparks so much more interest to me than, like, I probably wouldn't have done this. Like, there's no way that if I was sitting down and I was like, I'm gonna build a color story, that what I have done because I was duping this, I wouldn't have made this palette with this color story, even though I had these shadows, without this inspiration. And I could have just viewed it online for the inspiration, but I do think having the benefit of having this palette in my hands made duping it easier, and playing with it, like, I really was able to make it happen, right? Like I was able to, with knowing my collection a little bit better, because mine doesn't look exactly the same as this looks, shade for shade, I was building my palette around, like, I know how to now make things because I've used these shadows to make them look similar. But I don't think without having this in my hand, I don't know that I would have been so accurate. Now, does that mean that you need to run out and buy the Isamaya palette right now? I don't know. No. That's like not what I do on my channel. That's not what I promote on my channel, and I hope you know that. But for me, personally, I think there's a lot of value in this for me, because I personally, I like really love grungy eye looks, and I often think that when I'm starting and constructing an eye look, I think I'm gonna get something like really grungy, but I think that I have this gut instinct is to always make things look pretty, be color-wise and like in color theory. But with this palette, it feels like it's like I am constructing things, but it also still looks like I'm smearing something on my eye, and just the way the light hits these shadows in particular, really, it just makes it really easy for me to do a grungy look. I really like these dark, mysterious looks I've been getting. So I could say this also about it. This is also like kind of about the color story in general. I do feel like oftentimes my eye has looked the same since I've used this, but it's like not really true, because there's a lot of nuance to these shades. Having this, I'm reaching for it, it inspires a lot. So I don't know, knowing what I know now, if I would have felt satisfied just by duping it before buying it. But what I will suggest to you is, if you took a look at what I did, and you take a look at swatches and the eye looks that other people are doing with this eye palette, and you dupe it out, you might not feel like you need it. But I think for me, this grungy fantasy that it gives me and it sells me and it performs as, it's all very satisfying to me. Doing this really did prove to me that it perhaps wasn't a palette that I actually needed. But this color story being pre-made and purchased did add value, if that makes sense. Like, there was value for me in buying this palette, because I'm not gonna keep all these shadows like this, and I do think that this is a color story and a color pairing that I will come back to often and often. In conclusion, while I was able to pretty successfully dupe out the look and the eyeshadow palette with my collection, I didn't have to work as hard with these, because I had to work so hard with, not work so hard, but I had to work a little bit harder with like the shadows that I already had to make them match up. And the other thing is, the formulas in here, like, I don't want to say that they're revolutionary because like I don't know that that's actually what I feel, but they're just like kind of unlike anything else I've had, and so I don't know that these textures don't exist elsewhere, but I really enjoy playing with these textures. There's something about sticking my fingers in them, and like it just feels really rich. At first I thought the formulas felt cheap, but I think now playing with them and getting them to know them more, I feel a little bit differently about them. There's something about it. There's just something about it. And I don't really pay attention to what other people's reviews are when I'm still formulating thoughts on my reviews, so I don't know what other people are really saying about this palette. I've DM'd a few people who I know have it, and I've been like wondering what they thought of it, and they all kind of felt very similar to me so far. Like it's like inspiring them, and they enjoy the textures, and so that's what I can say. That's what I can attest to. But I still suggest if you were really interested in this and you didn't want to spend $115, or you do not have $115, but you have an eyeshadow collection where you think you can dupe it out, do this first. Do this first, and if this is all you can do, make this color story as best you can and play with it and really enjoy and live in it, because no one needs a palette. While this adds value to my life, while I have enjoyed having this and this adds value to me, you don't need to spend $115 on the Isamaya palette to feel like you are playing with the colors and textures and things. You just don't. So that's the moral of the story. That's always what we end with an eye for an eye. If you enjoyed watching this video, thank you so much. And if you are new here and you haven't subscribed, well, why aren't you subscribing? Hit the subscribe button now. We do a lot of this on the channel. And I'm also on Patreon, again, if you'd like to support me there. And that wraps it up. Thank you so much for watching. And remember to follow your haute, and you will find me. Bye. Bye.